So the first section is about the monk called Andronicus. He is the older monk, and he has a friend Joachim, who is a novice. They know each other. At the time of iconoclasm, Andronicus decides that he's going to refuse to take the vow for the new faith, and therefore leaves the city to go to an island, while Joachim, because he's very young, stays. However, in the second narrative, we meet Joachim when he is 70 years old, looking back probably 50 years at the period of that iconoclasm, where the two of them had a very deep relationship, a friendship, and so he then is reflecting on that time 80 years from hence, right? So we meet here Andronicus on the walk on the island. And again, as I said, both of the narratives take place during a walk that goes up a hill and down in the span of less than 2 hours. A light breeze under the trees, the faint noise of the grove humming lightly in the breeze, pine scent. But unlike that of a few trees scattered around the garden, is the sharp, overpowering redolence of pines stretching farther than his gaze can contain, covering all the space that is not the sea. Unable to withstand it, he lowers his body, leans his back against a tree. The breeze isn't cool, but hot, fragrant. Yet he does feel a certain coolness on his skin. Never forget the sea, he says to himself. He hears his voice, faint, reluctant. He needs to get used to hearing it. Even alone, he needs to get used to being heard. He needs to remember, to revive everything that the monastery called upon him to forget. Even if he has to live like those monks who endured the pious ordeal of solitude on the island 300, 400 years ago. Their faith never wavered, whether they lived on the hilltop, in the wilderness, or the desert. At least that's what people believed. Was it so in reality? Or was it the belief itself that satisfied the ones who chose to stay behind in the villages or in the city, those whose lives depended on the company of others because they couldn't be weaned from the sedative of multitudes? No one knew. In the monastery, some of the hermits were transformed into legends. The power of their faith was believed to have conquered mountains, fierce beasts, the devil. Still, there ought to have been among them more than a few who, bewildered by loneliness, mistook dreams for reality, eagerly accepted their own voice, their own shadow, as signs of other immaterial beings. How else could one explain the countless legends about monks encountering the devil, battling him on mountain peaks in the middle of deserts? Why were people worried about the devil, who was never seen in crowded cities where no one could walk without stepping on another's foot? So he decides that if he's going to live here, he has to, in fact, invent a life for himself. And so he says, if he is to live on this island, not as if inhabiting a dream, but the way he has lived for years at the monastery, if his life is to have some semblance of authenticity, he'll have to establish certain modest habits, such as eating his meals at certain times, drinking water, sleeping, waking up, preparing his food, praying, working the soil. Praying should continue to be among these modest habits. He should pray perhaps not like a monk, but like an ordinary person, like one of the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people living throughout the realms of the empire. He should certainly work the soil, even though he doesn't yet know how or which tools to make. He should work the soil, not just to grow things he can eat, but to foster those habits intended to make living easier. This way he will have discrete tasks to complete, each task separated from the other by the unoccupied hours in between. To fill those hours, He'll have to find other tasks, perhaps give himself to introspection, weigh, sift the whims of his mind, perhaps write something or grow flowers. He laughs. Grow flowers? Isn't it laughable for a man of God no less, who is running away from religious persecution, to put everything aside so he can indulge in growing flowers? The seagulls must have finished foraging by now. The crow also must have satisfied its hunger with their leftovers. If so, Andronicus thinks, the bird would fly back here, find him again. The island is perfectly still. Not a trace of mist impedes the view of the opposite shore. He imagines that the capital is still covered in mist, smoke, though he can't see it from this side of the island. Man is mortal. He might as well do something with his life, Andronicus thinks. There is no sense in waiting for death. For years he had used love alongside death, perhaps without claiming a direct correlation between the two words, but certainly making others think that death was worth loving. But now he suspects he was wrong on this count too. You must fight death until the very end, when death comes towering over you, when, despite your protestations, it carries you away. Only then must you accept death. All these years, as he used beguiling words to argue that those who accumulated wealth, read but a few pages a day, or carried out certain practices simply out of habit, were only augmenting their share of mortality, bringing themselves closer to their death, whom had he been trying to frighten, shame, or dissuade? Now he's not sure. He now recognizes that even eating or sleeping, like any other habit, brings one closer to one's death. Even praying augments one's share of mortality. The internal rhythm never falters. It has only one stop, only one ending toward which it moves steadily with each passing day. Therefore, you must do something new every day. You must recreate, reorder your world anew. Each day you must add new dimensions to your life so that you feel as if your share of mortality is diminishing, dissolving, crumbling, so that your life contains something else and of your own making, beside the modest habits intended to make living easier. Understand, at least prepare yourself to understand that within this rhythm you are actually living, not merely being swept along. Andronicus marvels at the lucidity of his mind. It strikes him as odd that until today he has not scrutinized his ideas as much as he is doing now. Drawn into the incredible, the terrifying complacency of faith, he seems to have neglected self-reflection altogether. He also seems to have nursed a stubborn rage in his heart, of the kind that sneers at petty occasions, saving its magnificent eruption for the most opportune moment that never quite arrives, a rage that grows all the keener from endless postponement. Stop the second section, Hill by Joachim. But I will do this first and read to you a little bit of Turkish, and then read the same section in English, because you're a center for art of translation. Havanın yumuşaklığından doğan, gelişen bir şey var. Yürümeye başladığında hava güneşliydi ama yavaş yavaş bir serinlik yayılıyordu ortalığa. Is there anyone who knows Turkish? That's good. Şimdi yürüdüğü, etlerini, eklemlerini hafif bir yorgunluk esrikliği basmaya başladığı için, bütün çabasını bacaklarıyla kollarına yüklediği için dışarılardan içine doğru bir sıcaklık akmaya başlaması şaşılacak bir şey değil. İçinden dışına doğru çıtırtılı bir takım kıvılcımlar gibi sıçrayan ürperti de uzun zamandır bildiği bir duygu. Ama güneş Aventinus'un ardına çekildikçe, yürüdüğü yolda gölge koyulaştıkça, ilerideki ağaçlığın biraz seyrelmiş, ama hala yemyeşil duran dalları arasında, yaprakları arasında hışıltı artıp sertleştikçe dağılan ışığın yumuşaklığı katmerleşiyor, kabarıyor. Koyulan bir şerbet düşünüyor Joachim. Gül yapraklarının rengini yitirdiği halde, incelip saydamlaştığı halde, o şerbetin içerisinde güllükten, yapraklıktan, salt tatlılıktan öte bir nesne oluvermelerini düşünüyor. Koyulan, olgunlaşan, aradığı söz bu, bir olgunlaşan. I don't know if you noticed, the pauses I gave are the few periods. So these are sort of associative bundles. Elizabeth, you went through this, you know, but I'm also talking, it's quite exhausting. So now I will read to you just a few sections, but these are especially to show you the language. The first one was more like to give you a sense of the themes. Something is born. It grows out of the air's softness. When he started his walk, there was sunlight, but also a cool breeze beginning to make itself felt. Now, after walking for some time, after experiencing the light drunkenness of exhaustion in his joints, his flesh, after bearing all the burden of exertion in his arms, his legs, he isn't surprised that a wave of heat begins to seep through his skin to the interior of his body. The inner chill shooting outward like crackling sparks is also a sensation he has known for a long time. But as the sun retreats behind Mount Aventus, the shadows deepen along the path he's been walking, the rustling grows louder, sharper among the leaves, among the branches, somewhat sparse yet still green in the woods ahead of him as the soft, diffuse light swells then redoubles. Joachim thinks of a thick nectar, how suspended in that liquid the faded, translucent petals of a rose suddenly become something beyond roseness, beyond petalness, beyond pure sweetness, dense, ripening, this, the word he's been looking for, ripening. He's thinking of fruit now, ripening fruits, their skin growing thinner, breaking open, as if they can no longer remain hidden, covered, no longer contain the softness, the sweetness teeming inside of them. The edges of the split skin blacken quickly, within days, within hours, the onset of death. Call it rot, call it mold, call it blackness. Is it not also true that what protects the rose petals, what carries them beyond roseness, petalness, sweetness, is exactly their half-dissolution in the nectar? Now, as he is doing what he has done every evening for years, each time as if for the first time, his whole being trembling, his palms wet with the icy cold sweat of excitement, every evening in rain or cold, now as he is climbing the foothill of Aventus, leaning on his staff, his tired footsteps weighed down by the day's burden, by years of guilt, he's actually remembering those other walks he used to take every evening for nearly a year before setting out for Rome. That was one. Just as no one knows exactly where the sun rises or where it sets, conversely, just as everyone knows with reasonable certainty the path the sun follows during the day, just as the sun hanging above you at the noon hour is among the few things you know with absolute certainty in this world, so do the farthest reaches of the walk vanish into the misty forgetfulness of a certain fog-covered meadow, while near the midpoint, the summit, the noon hour, the brightest moment of the walk, memories gradually come into light. Then, once at the summit, the walker caught in the acute brilliance of a piece of ice that refuses to thaw, beholding the point where the arms of the sea converge, the walk attains a kind of eternity that defies all other memories. title of the book? A Long Day's Evening. The title of the book in Turkish is very close to A Long Day's Journey into Night. And he deliberately plays it. And it's not the night that comes, but it's again that indeterminate in-betweenness of evening. That's all they get. A long day's journey into evening. And he was very familiar with this book and Celine's book as well. So he's playing with this title. So the title finally is explained to us in this one sentence. Again, no, two sentences this time. What matters is this light, the suspenseful interval before day turns to night. The still unsettled today becomes the unalterable yesterday. Life becomes death. This light held in perfect balance, teetering. The more he thinks about these, the more he will lose his balance, slide toward the night, toward yesterday, toward death. This light is significant.